A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer today's prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, you have created us to reflect your glory. You have chosen us to reflect your character, your righteousness, and your holiness. Knowing this, we should want to talk differently and think a little more carefully about the things we do. Search our heart, Lord, and remove from it anything that is not pleasing in your sight. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to now stand and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assembly Member Adams as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Adams. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal. Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions. There are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor. There are none. Messages from the Senate. There are none. Motions and resolutions. Oh, I'm sorry. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, under motions and resolutions, I request unanimous consent to do, well, I was going to say do all the following. I guess we got to have a separate vote on each one of them. Okay. Unanimous consent for Assembly Member Mr. Norby to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
Without objection.
Also request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Members Amiano, Chesborough, Davis, Evans, Jones, Ma, John Perez, Nilo, Salas, and Skinner to speak on adjournment memory today.
Without objection.
And request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Member Blakesley to have guests at his desk and a photographer on the floor during session today.
Without objection.
I also want to refer bills to the Rules Committee under Assembly Rule 97.
Without objection.
And I request unanimous consent to re-refer Hancock File Item 43 to the Rules Committee pursuant to Assembly Rule 97.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to re-refer SB 550, Mr. Flores, File Item 45 to the Rules Committee pursuant to Rule 97.
Without objection.
And also, I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 1641 by Mr. Hall from the Public Safety Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 1829 Cook from the Appropriations Committee to the Veterans Affairs Committee.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 1915 by Mr. Davis from the Utilities and Commerce Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2139 by Mr. Chesborough from the Natural Resources Committee to the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee, and then back to the Natural Resources Committee.
Without objection.
Also request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2233 by Mr. Nielsen from the Health Committee to the Public Safety Committee.
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2437 by Manuel Perez from the Higher Education Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
And I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2507 by Mr. Strickland from the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2717 by Mrs. Skinner from the Natural Resources Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 2753 by Mr. Furutani from the Judiciary Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
And then, at the request of the author, Madam Speaker, please remove file item 56, ACR 145 by Ms. Bronley from the consent or special consent calendar.
The clerk will note.
And at the request of Mr. Hagman, please remove the following file item, number 52, ACR 137 by Ms. Carter from the consent calendar.
The clerk will note. Business on the daily file, second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1894, 2555 with amendments, 2159 with amendments, 2203 with amendments, 2297 with amendments, 1708, 2002, 2396 with amendments, 2486 with amendments, 2190 with amendments, 1830 with amendments, Senate Bill 77, and Senate Bill 401.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Mr. Calderon, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to move to take up a matter without reference to file. SB 401 by Mr. Portantino, and request a two-day file notice be waived.
Without objection.
And also request a two-day file notice be waived on SB 77 by Pavley.
Without objection. The Republicans will go into caucus for 10 minutes. Thank you. Members, the House is back in session. We are going to take up SB 401 by Wolk. Floor jockey Mr. Portantino, without reference to file. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 401 by Senator Wolk and others, an act relating to taxation.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a bill that we've seen in other forms and has gotten off this floor several times. It's back with one change. This measure provides needed relief to struggling homeowners by forgiving income resulting from short sales. It ensures that renewable energy projects are not unduly taxed on federal grants. It reduces the difference between federal and state law, easing tax preparation for taxpayers and tax preparers alike, and does not contain the erroneous claim for refund penalty that was the reason the governor vetoed a similar conformity bill twice. Frankly, I think that was a provision that needed to be in here. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. While this measure is not an urgency or tax levy, I have a letter from the Franchise Tax Board stating that they will immediately direct taxpayers to exclude income from short sales and renewable energy grants. I respectfully ask for an aye vote, and I ask for immediate transmittal to the Senate if this bill passes.
Questions or debate? Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. As Vice Chair of the Revenue and Taxation Committee for the last 4 years, I certainly applaud an attempt at additional conformity with federal tax rules. However, this bill is not complete conformity with the federal tax code. In fact, the most glaring absence of conformity with the federal tax code that is not in this bill is conformity with federal law regarding the tax deductibility of health savings accounts. When I entered the legislature in 2004, California was one of only 4 states in the nation that had not yet conformed its tax code to allow the pre-tax treatment of people saving money for their own health needs. Now California is one of 2 states. Why don't we have conformity with federal law on health savings accounts? I've carried legislation to do so. It was rejected, not one vote from the other side. Several of my colleagues have carried more than one bill, always to have that bill fail in revenue and taxation without any votes from the other side. Now, I asked the question of the author of this measure yesterday in revenue and taxation, no, Tuesday, in revenue and taxation, why it was that health savings accounts were not included in conformity. And the response was, "That's a good question." And she turned to her assistant and asked the question, and she turned back to me and she said, "Well, it's too expensive." Ladies and gentlemen, the hard-working men and women of the state of California, if they're going to have conformity, deserve complete conformity. Why is it that we are now one of only 2 states in the entire nation that has not conformed our tax code to the federal tax code regarding the pre-tax treatment of health savings accounts? Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, there is a very appropriate measure in this bill. It's a measure that allows people not to be taxed on short sales of their homes. This is necessary, and in fact, one of my colleagues, my distinguished colleague from the greater Sacramento area, has carried this legislation for some time to provide this very needed relief for California homeowners that find themselves underwater and have worked out deals with their lenders. But ladies and gentlemen, instead of having a clean bill that we could vote on up or down on this measure, it has been worked into this conformity measure that again is not complete conformity, it is only partial conformity, with the most glaring omission being the lack of conformity with the federal treatment of health savings accounts taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, I would strongly urge a no vote on this halfway measure.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Tax conformity, various proposals of tax conformity with the same name revenue neutrality tax conformity, various proposals under the same name are not all the same thing. There is one thing to have revenue neutrality where you are affecting fundamentally the same class of taxpayers. There is another, I would suggest, rather contorted version of revenue neutrality where one class of taxpayers pays for the benefit that accrues to another class of taxpayer. Now, in addition to the errors, the deficiencies of omission that this particular proposal has, as was articulated by my friend from Orange County, this version of revenue neutrality for the sake of tax conformity whacks one class of taxpayer for the benefit of the other. We have significant tax impacts here on individuals. In fact, by our calculation, up to $15 million in the next fiscal year due to the changing in taxation of minor children. This was a change that was made a few years ago to avoid, not permit tax avoidance, but I guess we're discovering it doesn't bring enough into the Treasury, so we have to change it to take even more. There are benefits in here that accrue to businesses. Now, you'll find nobody in this chamber more pro-business than myself. I am a businessman. But I have to tell you, it's awfully troubling when we're going to provide a benefit to one class of taxpayer and have another class pay for it. I would submit that is not revenue neutrality. It is a contortion of it, perhaps, but it's not. Now, we heard the issue of the mortgage debt relief. This is very important. The state of California, without that change, is going to receive windfall profits merely because of an economic calamity and people negotiating with their mortgage holder to get out of their mortgage, and the bank is agreeing it's better for them, for the mortgage holder to sell it at a loss. They forgive the debt, everybody moves on, and the state of California is going to whack them for it, even though the federal government long ago eliminated that windfall profit for an extended period of years that California refused to do. I have to wonder if there was a strategy on the part of people in this institution to hold that back exactly for the attempted, what I would say is extortion, to get the votes for a tax conformity revenue neutral bill that is not revenue neutral. It is absolutely true that that issue should be handled, and members, we can. I have a bill that addresses that issue singularly. I did last year, I do this year. There is a similar bill in the Senate. We could have acted on this all along. If you really and truly believe that that's an important thing to address, we have the ability to do it. My bill in the Assembly, which, by the way, is up on Monday. We will discuss it at Rev-N-Tax on Monday. I urge a no vote on this. Let's move forward on the singular issue of mortgage debt relief, and we can handle that without contorting ourselves into a disingenuous definition of revenue neutrality for a conformity.
Mr. Gaines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to SB 401. While it has wonderful merits in terms of short sale of homes and not having to be taxed on that supposed gain, which I support, but we clearly had another piece of legislation that my colleague from Fair Oaks had proposed and was delayed in getting a hearing within this legislature, a clean bill that would have focused just on that specific issue. Instead, we have a piece of legislation that focuses on actually increasing taxes in other areas. You've got the increase in age of minor children related issue on unearned income, issues related to modified interest suspension, also the principal sale of an allocation for a sale of a home, uniform definition of a child, and modification of penalty for failure to file S-chapter returns, which, if you add all these increases up, equal about $82 million in tax increases that are being shoved into what should have been a good, clean bill in terms of exempting individuals from having to pay tax on a negotiated settlement of a mortgage. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate. Sorry. Mr. Anderson.
I also rise in opposition for many of the reasons that my Republican colleagues have mentioned earlier. And I just want to be on record in support in hopefully co-authoring my colleagues from Fair Oaks, his bill. There's many ways that we can accomplish these goals that would actually, California would be in a better position than voting for SB 401. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is really a good compromise bill. If you look at who's supporting this, it really shows a good faith effort on behalf of the author to reach a compromise that will assist many more taxpayers in California that need assistance right now. I urge an aye vote on this. It's gone through a very good process. It incorporates some ideas that I believe many Republicans support in principle. So I encourage an aye vote, and if there are concerns over this not being a two-thirds requirement bill, then members, please just put up your votes and put up 54 votes, and that will handle that concern. But this is a good faith effort. It's been reached through compromise. I encourage your support today.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe this is a better bill than the one we saw previously. It takes out the erroneous payment provision that many of us didn't like from the prior version. So this bill I do support. I would also add that in part because of that, the California Chamber of Commerce also supports this bill. So that speaks to how this actually is something that has broad business support and broad member support. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffries.
Members, I rise to also indicate my support for the relief on the mortgage tax component portion of the bill. That's a good bill. That portion is a good, clean portion. Unfortunately, we've contaminated this bill with some sort of compromise between some sort of parties who have decided that tax increases should be a part of this bill. You have taken a very, very good bill to help lots of homeowners, thousands of homeowners across the state, and ruined it, killed it with tax increases. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of the mortgage tax relief portion of this bill because of the efforts of the governor and of this legislature. Foreclosures in California have now declined for the 6th straight month. If we can continue to have reducing foreclosures, we will help stabilize the real estate market and continue us on a path towards economic recovery. This part of that bill will go a ways to help people do that. We respectfully request an aye vote.
Mr. Valines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just got out to the floor on this bill, was talking to a constituent of mine off the floor who I promised I would vote for the mortgage relief bill, but this isn't the mortgage relief bill. I would oppose having the other parts of this bill that we've added to it, but I actually want to just say something instructive, even if I might not have the attention of the floor. Why wouldn't we simply help constituents? There's a clean bill. It could be anybody. We could all co-author a bill that does just the portion of home relief for those that are hurting. Why do we add other portions? In this case, it's tax increases. But whatever it is, why add anything to this bill? This hurts working people. This hurts people that are struggling. What we're saying is, politically inside game here, okay, we're going to raise some taxes and make it hard for you to vote against it. What we're really telling the person on the street is, you're suffering, and we acknowledge that. We want to help you. There's no reason for the state to collect taxes on you when you're selling short. But at the same time, we're going to raise other taxes on you that you don't know about and balance it out. I don't think they would say yes. In fact, I'm sure they'd say no. My constituent I just talked to, who I told I would support this bill, said, Mike, don't do it. But please work for a clean bill. Most people are losing their houses. We've got to stop playing politics and acknowledge they matter. Do the clean bill. This is wrong. This is going to set up all the wrong steps all the way into the budget because we're simply not doing the right thing. And we're making it an argument when it doesn't have to be. And guess what? Folks in the gallery, folks watching on TV that are selling their houses short and who are paying taxes on it are now going to have to pay other taxes. They're going to be upset with us. This is wrong. I urge your no vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Portantino, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I join with my colleagues in lauding the tax relief in this bill. I laud them in supporting the provisions to stimulate green economy. I join them in lauding the protections for people who have had to sell their homes short. And that's why this bill incorporates, I believe, 3 provisions that are coming up in Rev and Tax on Monday are incorporated into this bill. This bill has amazing support from business community, from the Chamber of Commerce, from average taxpayers who have had to sell their homes short. This bill will get a signature and it will bring relief to the many people in our state who need it, and it will stimulate the economy. As far as conformity with the health care or health maintenance accounts, there will be a bill coming up on Monday on that very point, and we are going to ask the author of that bill to make sure that that bill conforms with the newly adopted federal health care regulations. If we are going to have conformity, let's make that conformity be with the newly adopted health care provisions, not the old health care provisions, because that would make us not in conformity with the federal government. I respectfully ask for an aye vote and immediate transmittal to the to the Senate on this bill that will stimulate the economy and bring relief to our homeowners who desperately need it, and I urge an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 20. The measure passes. Without objection, Mr. Portantino requests immediate transmittal to the Senate. Okay, members, we are going to take up SB 77 Pavley without reference to file. Ms. Skinner. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 77 by Senator Pavley and others, an act relating to energy, making an appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Ms. Skinner.
Madam Speaker, members, thank you. SB 77 is a jobs bill. It will spur the creation of thousands of jobs and reduce the cost of consumer and small business loans for energy improvements. Energy improvements that benefit workers, consumers, homeowners, businesses, and the environment. This bill is designed to accelerate the use of one of the most promising new financing mechanisms for property improvements called PACE, which stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. This bill will authorize a $50 million reserve fund that can be used for qualified PACE financing programs as credit enhancement to lower the financing costs to borrowers. The key issue is that this fund will enable us to get the interest rates on these bonds down so that this becomes an affordable program for any of our local governments that want to pursue it and any of our businesses or homeowners who want to take care of it. The difference between the bill that you had in the past is that this bill is a much smaller version of the program. This bill only allows for residential properties of 4 units and less or commercial properties of 25,000 and below, and it removes the requirement of prevailing wage. So it means it is a powerful tool for our local governments to stimulate the economy while providing a competitive financing program for commercial and residential property owners. I ask for your aye vote.
Is there any questions or debate on this measure? Seeing none, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. Please vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 56, no 10. Measure passes. On the urgency. On the urgency, ayes 56, noes 10. Ms. Skinner, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I ask that upon passage of this bill that it have immediate transmittal to the Senate.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to go to the third reading file. Items 15 through 25 will be passed and retained. Item 26, AB 2035, Mr. Cotto. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2035 by Assemblymember Cotto, an act relating to health care coverage.
Mr. Cotto.
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, this bill has support on both sides. It requires third-party administrators of self-funded dental plans to include in the explanation of benefits documents notice that the dental plan is not subject to state regulation and instructions to direct questions to the United States Department of Labor, which regulates such plans. And I would ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Ayes 69, no 0. Measure passes. Item 28, Ms. Hayashi, AB 762. Clerk to read.
Assembly Bill 1762 by Assemblymember Hayashi, an act relating to real estate.
Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1762 clarifies the Business and Professions Code relating to advance fees in real estate transactions. The bill clarifies that the definition of advance fee excludes money charged for real estate listings, advertising and promotions, referrals to other real estate brokers or salespersons in connection with mortgage loan origination activity. There's no opposition to the bill. The bill is sponsored by the California Association of Realtors. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 72, no 0. Measure passes. Ms. Hayashi, you have another measure, item number 30, AB 1596. Clerk to read.
Assembly Bill 1596 by Assemblymember Hayashi, an act relating to protective orders.
Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1596 will ensure the safety of those individuals who are protected under multiple restraining orders by simply clarifying that the most restrictive restraining order shall be enforced. The bill is sponsored by the Judicial Council, has the support of AFSCME, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 69, noes 0. Measure passes. Item 29, ACR 123, Mr. Chesbro. Clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 123 by Assemblymember Chesbro relative to the California Memorial Project Remembrance Day.
Mr. Chesbro.
Madam Speaker and members, ACR 123 will proclaim the third Monday of each September California Memorial Project Remembrance Day in California to honor and restore the dignity to individuals who lived and died in California's developmental centers and mental hospitals. From the 1880s till the 1960s, more than 45,000 individuals passed away while living in these institutions, and sadly, for the most part, their remains were placed in unmarked graves in mass sites throughout the state. That's no way we would want our friends or our family to be treated, and yet, for the better part of a century, that's the way we treated the residents of our mental hospitals and developmental centers. The California Memorial Project is an opportunity to restore the cemeteries or graves where these individuals are buried, as well as the dignity of those who died, by preserving their histories through proper documentation. This bill is sponsored by Disability Rights California, California Network of Mental Health Clients, and People First of California. There's no opposition, and I would urge an aye vote.
Mr. Chesbro is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. There will be 65 co-authors. Is there any further discussion or debate? If not, we can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. We will return to file item 24, ACR 115 Emerson. Clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 115 by Assemblymember Emerson, an act relating to California Safe Digging Month.
Mr. Emerson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. ACR 115 would help educate excavators and the public on safe digging practices. This resolution would bring visibility to the underground infrastructure that the state depends on while keeping our state safe and connected. The Underground Service Alert of Southern California, also known as Dig Alert, offers one-call centers where Californians can simply dial 811 to determine the location of utility lines before digging to prevent the costly error of cutting fiber optic cable or damaging a power or gas line. Dig Alert was formed in 1976 after a construction crew working on Venice Boulevard in Culver City hit a petroleum pipeline. The explosion killed 9 people and an entire city block was burned to the ground, causing millions of dollars of damage. By getting the message out, this resolution will help protect our communities and ensure that this tragedy will not happen again. Underground Service Alert of Northern California, AT&T, and PG&E are among the supporters of this resolution, and I ask the first roll be open for co-authors.
Mr. Torlakson.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to support this measure. This follows, again, a number of tragedies, one of which occurred in my district that riveted attention to the need to have these call centers and have this check and double-check system. Urge your support for safety. This is a collaborative effort between the businesses and the labor unions involved and the workers involved in these underground constructions. Thank you.
Seeing no further debate or questions, Mr. Emerson is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. There are 63 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. File item 35, AJR 32. Mr. Monning, clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 32 by Assemblymember Monning relative to gender discrimination.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. In 1979, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. The Convention's primary focus is to discuss gender discrimination and inequity issues around the world. The United States is considered to be a major proponent of human rights, as well as a leader of the democratic societies of the world. Yet it is the only industrialized nation in the world that has not ratified the treaty. Ratification of a treaty merely commits governments to take steps to ensure that women in the country will have the right to work, access to child care, adequate health care, and equal access to quality education. AJR 32 declares that the California State Legislature believes it is important to address gender equity issues and requests the U.S. Congress and Secretary of State to place the UN treaty as a high priority in order to accelerate its passage through the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This is supported by the senior legislature and the Association of University Women of California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I encourage, even though I do see that there is an opposed recommendation on this resolution, I really do want to encourage all members to think about the ladies. We had our Women of the Year Day not that long ago. Women represent the majority of our population, and yet we continue to be underrepresented in so many areas of professions, of employment, and there is a loss of wealth to everyone when women are discriminated against. Let me repeat that. There is a loss of wealth to everyone when women are discriminated against. And what we have seen in this economy in the last year is more men have lost their jobs than women, and the women who are now supporting families are earning less and having to be responsible for more. By not supporting this basic resolution of equality, you are telling the women in this chamber and the women watching and women everywhere that your full equality and right to participate fully in every aspect of our society is not important. And I think that would be a very sad message in 2010 to put out there from this chamber. Women's equality is about a better world, a better economy for everyone. So it's very distressing to me as a woman and as chair of the Women's Caucus to see that there is an opposed recommendation on this resolution. And I would encourage every one of you who has an important woman in your life, which I believe is all of us, to think of her and her right to equality. So thank you for that consideration. Thank you for supporting this resolution. It is not just about the words on the page. It is about the treatment of the human beings around us. So I ask for your support and your co-authorship of this important resolution.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This resolution is not about women's rights. This resolution is about the laws of our land, about the U.S. Constitution. The fact is that when the United States Senate ratifies a treaty, as this resolution proposes that it does, then that treaty becomes the law of the land and supersedes all state and federal law as a result. The fact is that the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, otherwise known as CEDAW, that this committee within the United Nations has actually taken an expansive view of its mandate and has gone so far to criticize UN member nations like Ireland, Peru, Argentina, and other nations for their restrictions on abortion. It has even attacked Belarus for issuing a declaration in favor of Mother's Day, and has criticized the Netherlands for not extending employee benefits to prostitutes. This is fact. Now, the question that I have for all of you is, are you willing to allow the United Nations, which presumably could have on the CEDAW committee such member nations as Saudi Arabia, where it's legal for one man to marry 4 women, where it's legal to ban women from participating in public life, to restrict their driving. Are you comfortable with allowing a member state like Saudi Arabia to have purview over United States domestic policy? Because if the U.S. Senate ratifies this treaty, that is exactly what happens under the Constitution of the United States of America. This is not symbolic, ladies and gentlemen. This is deadly serious. Our Constitution says that when the U.S. Senate ratifies a treaty, it becomes law of the land. Are you prepared to have Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Qatar, are you prepared to have those nations have influence over United States family law? Because that's what you're voting for if you vote yes on this resolution. In the strongest possible terms, I urge a no vote on this resolution.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. While I have tremendous respect for my colleague from Orange County, I couldn't disagree more. The fact of the matter is the United Nations doesn't have any more authority over the United States government or its people than the United States government that is duly elected gives it. This resolution would do nothing more than encourage the Senate to take action, meaning the Senate, those members of the U.S. Senate that were elected by the people of the United States of America, to make determinations about what's right and what's not. I think this argument is, at best, specious, and at worst, the worst kind of demagoguery. To suggest that rogue nations are going to somehow have authority over our country because the U.S. Senate has to ratify something is to fundamentally misunderstand how a law becomes the law of the land. Members, I do believe this bill is about protecting women and about encouraging that all women be treated equally. I think it's a substantive measure that does very little by way of changing California law, and I would strongly encourage an aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
Madam Speaker, our time here is precious, and rather than sending non-binding resolutions to the Congress in Washington, I'd prefer we focus on the many issues that we have direct jurisdiction over here in California.
Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The comments of my colleague from Orange County make no sense to me because we're not actually ratifying this group of people. We're actually ratifying a document. And it's a text of that document that we're asking Congress to ratify. And so when I look at a bill, it doesn't really matter to me who authored that bill. If it's good policy, I vote for it. So to us, it shouldn't really matter how this document came about. If it's a good document that protects women, we ought to ask Congress to ratify it. That's really the only issue at stake. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to stand up and speak, but I felt that with all the men of the floor debating women's rights in front of me, I really had to add my voice. And I appreciate the impassioned debate, but members, this is personal. This is personal. This is for women. And whoever made the recommendation to oppose this resolution did your caucus a disservice, because this is personal for women. It's personal for women not only on this floor, not only in the gallery, not only in the state of California, not only in the United States, but in the entire world. It's personal. And this means something to us. 51% of the world's population has been struggling for its rights since the beginning of time. Here we are in the year 2010 debating whether or not the state of California will add its voice to ask the United States Senate to adopt this treaty that was adopted by many of the world's countries decades ago. And we're still debating it. I just can't believe it. Please, please vote to add your voice to the cause of the rights of women throughout the world. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Tran.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This resolution was heard in committee, and a lot of questions were asked. The purpose of the reso was obviously to support women's rights, and everybody, I believe, in this room agrees on the general principles as far as women's rights and equality. One of the main sticking point that I'd like to share with all my colleagues in our chamber here as to why the U.S. Senate has not taken up on this resolution and passed it over the years was the issue of abortion. Because CEDAW basically promotes and asks for free and unfettered abortion. It's a controversial issue, and that is why the U.S. Senate has not taken on this. And that is also why it's so controversial as well at the state level. So it's one issue that I wanted to add in our discussion on this issue.
Ms. Brownlee.
Yes, I stand and rise in support of AJR 32 and stand with my women colleagues on the floor in support of this. This is personal. And really, this treaty was presented in 1979 and passed by the UN in 1979. And here we are 30 years later, and the United States is the only industrialized country who's not signed on to this treaty. 185 other countries have ratified this particular treaty. Ratification of this treaty merely commits governments to take steps to ensure that women in their countries will have the right to work, access to child care, adequate health care, and equal access to a quality education. How can we not support something like that that is merely asking that countries in our country work towards equality? I just can't believe that we're having this debate on this floor, that we would not have a unanimous vote on this floor for this resolution, and I stand in support of it and hope that every single member will too. Thank you.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are many reasons to support this resolution. I'd like to share with you one reason. 2 days ago, my son called me and said that he and his wife are expecting a child, and it's going to be a girl. And for that reason, amongst the many others, I rise to support this resolution.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Monning, you may close.
Madam Speaker, first I want to congratulate Mr. Arambula and his family. Second, I want to thank the members who have addressed their concerns on this. Let me just set the record straight for the opponents. Mr. DeVore is absolutely right. A ratified treaty does become part of domestic U.S. law. That's why the U.S. Senate has ratified human rights treaties. 179 countries have ratified this. The U.S. is keeping company currently with Iran and Somalia, who have not ratified this. The bill is not about abortion issues. It recognizes the right to life as a human rights term, the right not to be killed, the right of a woman not to be killed as an act of domestic violence, the right of a woman not to die for lack of access to medical care. That is the fundamental human right that 179 countries, governments have ratified, recognizing equal rights and equity, gender equity for women. I ask for your aye vote. Madam Speaker, I'd like the first vote to be for co-authors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monning. Mr. Monning is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. There will be 52 co-authors. Since this is an AJR, this requires a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 52, noes 2. The measure passes. File item 36AB 2067, pass and retain. File item 37, AB 1947, pass and retain. File item 38, AB 2154, Solorio. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2154 by Assemblymember Solorio, an act relating to vote by mail ballots.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill would allow counties to offer voters the option to call their local elections office to request a vote by mail ballot. Currently, these ballots can only be provided if they're requested via mail or via online secure form. As you know, the vote by mail option is becoming increasingly popular, and local election officials are encouraging its use. Counties also enjoy cost savings from vote by mail balloting due to a variety of factors, including poll site costs, poll worker staffing levels, and poll worker training. This bill is sponsored by the Orange County Board of Supervisors and has the support of the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Fong.
I rise in support of AB 2154. We heard this bill in the Elections and Redistricting Committee earlier this week, which I chair. In our hearing, county elections officials told us that one of the most common calls that they receive in the days leading up to Election Day are calls from voters who want to get a vote-by-mail ballot. Under existing law, counties have to mail an application to those voters who call in asking for a vote-by-mail ballot. This slows down the process both for the voter and for the election officials. Given that election officials already have voters on the phone asking for vote-by-mail ballots, it would be much easier if they could simply ask a few questions to verify a voter's identity, then mail that voter a vote-by-mail ballot. The procedures for verifying a voter's identity on the phone are the same that currently exist when a voter applies for a vote-by-mail ballot electronically. AB 2154 is common sense and will benefit both the voter and the election officials. Thank you.
Mr. Norby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is sponsored by the Orange County Board of Supervisors, on which I only recently sat. It is a bill which I support. It will not compromise any existing guarantees of voter integrity. It simply allows a request for a ballot to be done by telephone, but when that ballot is submitted, it still requires a signature and all the other guarantees. It will save our registrar a great deal of money and has the opportunity to do that throughout the state. So our county does support it, and so do I.
Mr. Solorio, you may close.
Members, this bill would increase voter participation throughout the state. It would involve no new cost to the state, would save locals money. I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 47, noes 15. The measure passes. File items 39 to 42 will be passed and retained. File item 43, SB 82 for amendments. Hancock. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 82 with amendments by Assemblymember Skinner.
Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, SB 82, the amendments before you will remove the provisions pertaining to the Public Resources Code and add provisions to the Education Code. These amendments will aid community colleges in providing students with greater access to public transit and parking services. With these amendments, the bill will be referred to rules for re-referral to Policy Committee. I ask for your aye vote on the amendments.
All in favor of the amendments, please say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Bill's out to print. File item 44, SB 253 by Weiland, pass and retain. File item 45 for amendments, SB 550. I'm sorry, SB 82 was just amended and re-referred to Rules Committee. Okay, file item 45, SB 550, Flores for amendments by Ms. Hayashi. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 550 with amendments by Assemblymember Hayashi.
Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The amendments to SB 550 would require the operator of a drilling company to file evidence of insurance to cover the cost of cleanup from drilling activities or accidents. I request that the amendments be adopted and the bill out to print and back on file.
Any questions or debate on these amendments? Mr. Hagman is asking for a roll call vote. Takes the majority of those present and voting. Ms. Hayashi is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Ms. Hayashi is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll. Ayes 42, noes 25. The amendments are adopted. Without objection, the measure is re-referred to the Rules Committee. Okay, members, we are at the second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2009 by Assemblymember Logue, an act relating to county penalties.
Clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 67, noes 0. The consent calendar is adopted.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 128.
Ayes 67, noes 0.
Assembly Bill 2455.
Ayes 67, noes 0.
Assembly Joint Resolution 31.
Ayes 67, noes 0. That completes the consent calendar. Okay, members, there is one adjourn in memory that we are going to present today. The others will be read on Monday. Any members wishing to submit adjourn in memories to the desk, please do so. Mr. Calderon, for what purpose do you rise?
Yes. Request unanimous consent to return to motions and resolutions so Mr. Blakesley can introduce some very important people.
Without objection. Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I have the distinct privilege of having with me on the floor my family. And I obviously would not, and none of us would be able to serve except for the loving support each of us receives from our family. So I want to take this moment to introduce my smallest one first. This is Landis, who's turning 7 this month. Landy, wave.
Members, attention, please.
My second daughter, Harland, who's just exiting middle school, going to high school, and is very active in theater. Harland, embarrassingly, wave your hand. Dad's embarrassing you. And my wonderful, lovely wife, Kara, who has been incredibly supportive. I'm so indebted. And interestingly, some 22 years ago, she served in this building as a Senate fellow for Senator Garamendi. So she's very intimately acquainted with what we do, and it's a real treat for all of us to be on the floor today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, members. We'd also like to welcome Mr. John Longville at the back of the chambers, former Assembly member John Longville. Okay, Ms. Salas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and I would like to have your attention and your respect at this time. I want to adjourn in memory of a very extraordinary, ordinary man, my uncle, Ruben Casillas. Ruben Casillas was the son of a young immigrant couple who migrated from Mexico to Chula Vista in 1917. He was born in 1921. He was the second of 7 sons. All 7 sons, including my father, served in the military, and they were part of the extraordinary generation of men and women that they call the greatest generation. These members of the greatest generation, including my uncle, grew up in the depths of the Depression, and like many, he had to leave school early to support his family. When World War II broke out, though he was exempt from the draft because he worked in a defense plant building airplanes, he joined the Army, and he was part of the liberation campaign of the Philippines in the closing days of the war. And then he stayed another year after the war was over to help rebuild that nation. And like the extraordinary men and women of that era, he returned home to a grateful nation, a nation that allowed him to improve his life through the GI Bill that he accessed to get a better education and to buy a home for his family. A grateful nation that provided an infrastructure to make sure that the families of that time were able to give their families a stable living condition and good jobs. First and foremost, he was a good husband and a father. He was somebody who gave back to his community his whole life. He was a fourth-degree Knight of Columbus, and he served as that Grand Knight in his council twice. He was preceded in death by my Aunt Rosalie and his two sons, Reuben Jr. and Paul. He's survived by my cousins, Christina, Loretta, and Ralph, 5 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchildren. Members, his passing is especially sorrowful to our family of 9 children that grew up in that greatest generation. Only 3 remain, his sister Rebecca, brothers Armando and Joe David Casillas. But it's a reminder to all of us to cherish and to treasure those of the greatest generation that are passing every day so quickly. We are losing them. They were the greatest generation who gave so much for all of us. They contributed and they sacrificed so much to ensure that the United States was the best country on earth. And we all should follow their example, and I think that we have lost sight of the sacrifice that this greatest generation made to all of us, and that we should return to that framework of thinking more about our own personal comfort and to be more like that greatest generation who saw the value of what building a great nation was. And to tell you quite frankly that those of my generation, the baby boomers, most benefited from their sacrifices. And unfortunately, it's the baby boomers that are so reluctant to give back to this society. We must return to the values of the greatest generation. And that's why I rise in such sorrow, not only for my family, but for the passing of all those greatest generation that we should admire, respect, and emulate always. So please join me in mourning, not only for my family and the passing of my Uncle Reuben, but the passing of another member of one of the greatest generations ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salas. Please bring the name of your uncle to the desk to be printed in the journal. This concludes the business on the daily file. In the regular session, all items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, April 9th, no floor session, no check-in. Monday, April 12th, floor session at 12 noon. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that this House stands adjourned until Monday, April 12th at 12 noon. Quorum call is lifted.
That's without reference to file SB 77. Nielsen, no to aye.
Nielsen, Senate Bill 77, no to aye.